In this special edition of the Daily Nerd, I'm interviewing someone that has 30 years' experience in the translation industry, and guess what? She is pissed off with Omid Scobie right now. Hey up everyone, it's me, Stef the Alternerd, your nerdy alternative, and welcome to another dose of the Daily Nerd, where I break down the royal news and gossip of the day that's pretty much caught me eye, and oh my goodness, yes, that is right, I have someone on this video right now that I will be interviewing who has 30 years experience in the translation industry, and like I said, she is mightily miffed off at Omid Scobie right now and how he's trying to explain away the Dutch translation of Endgame. Her name is Ailey, so everyone, I'd like you to say hi to Ailey. Ailey, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me on today's video.
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, like I said, Ailey has 3 decades of experience in the translator industry. She has her own company. It's called Tiggy Associates. And I love the tagline, get Tiggy with it. Na 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 na, get Tiggy with it. But yes, this is the Toronto Interpreters Group International. So, Ailey, could you be kind enough just to give us a quick explanation of what Tiggy Associates is all about, please?
Yeah, sure. We provide translation and interpreting services, in multi languages to in various situations.
Okay. And what do you specifically do within your own company of Tiggy Associates?
I'm a project manager, translation coordinator, so I coordinate translation.
Okay. If anyone wants to know any further details about Tiggy Associates, you can go to tiggyassociates.com. The website address will also be linked in the description bar below. But with you being a project manager, Ailey, I think you would be one of the best people to question in the industry as to how the process of translation works, right? Now, presumably with Tiggy Associates, you have dealt with, translating manuscripts before, such as similar to those like Endgame, books, novels, that kind of thing, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so generally speaking, when someone wants to come to, let's say, Tiggy Associates and says, right, okay, I've got this book and I need it translated into these languages, like, how does that approach work in the first place? Is it the author that comes to you, the publisher, the agent, a mixture of all three?
Well, it's usually the publisher. The publisher would because typically publishers have, preferred translators that they've worked with. I mean, even though translators are independent, typically freelance, a publisher will have people that they trust and they're comfortable with. So the publisher would reach out to me, and yeah, the publisher would reach out and say, "This is what I have, this is what I need, and these are the languages that I
Okay.
require it in."
So the first thing that we've just learnt right there and then is, generally speaking, it's the publishers that reach out to their tried and tested, their tried and true translators. So in this instance, opinion, conspiracy theory, whatever, right? It seems that Omid Scobie's publishers went to someone that they trusted, that they've used before, i.e. Saskia Peeters, for the translation of the Dutch copy of Endgame. Okay, so when that approach happens and the work is accepted and the translator then gets the manuscript to start translating, do they get that manuscript all in one go or do they get it in pieces? Like, how does that work?
They get it in one go. Yeah, they get it. I mean, in my experience in the 30 years, I've never been given a job, piecemeal, or typically you get a final version, right? And you translate from that. Otherwise, it gets too confusing, right? And if there are revisions or amendments or changes to the work, I mean that's something that goes to everybody who received that work. So if there's if they make a change, say they finalized it, they come back at you and say, okay, we want to add this or whatever. That goes to everybody. Okay, that doesn't just go to one country, right? So those revisions go to everybody, and typically it's a process. There's a revision form. They don't. It's not willy nilly. Everything is in writing, so it's yeah.
Okay. So the second thing that we've learned here is that the translator will get the manuscript all in one go. So it's there from beginning to end, exactly what the translator is going to translate in the first place. It's not like it's a piecemeal of, okay, well, part of the I don't know, the first draft goes to her, then a part of the second draft goes to her. No, it's the full completed final draft that goes to the translator, so there's no confusion as to which draft, which manuscript is being translated in the first place. Another thing
Yeah.
as well that you added there is that if there are any additions to be made to the translation, then it's not just sent to that particular translator for that particular language, but it's sent to the whole, let's say, translator community that's working on that particular manuscript for all the languages, so it's all the same. Now, whilst the translator is going through the manuscript and translating it word for word, typically speaking, how many checks and balances are there along the way? How many times is the translator monitored and checked for the accuracy of what they're translating in the first place?
Well, this is the hugest part of their job, right? This is important. So, a translator will translate the work, and then typically they have an independent proofreader who is also a translator. That goes over that, and I mean that's a huge process. That can go. It really depends on the contract the translator has. Um, y- you know, it's not easy. Okay. There's checks and balances in place. I think I was saying to you earlier, for instance, if they make a revision, okay, this is the other thing. So if they make a revision, they don't, there's a form. Okay. There's a whole procedure. And if there's a revision, it's not in one language. Okay. Everyone has to remember that there's one source text. Okay. And that's English. Okay. They're not going to make a revision to the Dutch, a revision to the Italian, a revision to the Chinese. Do you know what I mean? The revision will be made to the English. Okay. Remember, there's only one English, right? So that English source document that goes out to all the translators. If there's a change in that source document, that goes to everybody. Okay. Do you know what I mean? It's not something that would go just to one country. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
so
it's
what you're saying is, if there was a change to the source document, then we wouldn't have just seen the change in, let's say, the Dutch version of Endgame. We would have seen these quote unquote royal racist names in every single document, in every single version of Endgame, in every single country that it's out. The other thing as well that you mentioned in terms of the checks and balances that we've learned here is that it's not just, you've just got the translator, they translate it and that's it. You then have someone above, let's say, that translator that's independent of the translator that double checks to ensure that every single word is correct. So you've got someone who's essentially translating the translator to ensure that everything is correct. Is that right?
I wouldn't say that. What I would say is that you have it's we call it a check the checker policy in
Yeah.
our industry, right? So the translator is the boss in that whole scenario. The translator is the boss, but the translator has proofreaders. They don't the proofreaders aren't there to retranslate. They're there to make sure they cross-reference. They don't forget all this is digital too, right? So they've got their screens all set up. They can see, that they can see um it's like in real time. Do you know what I mean? Like they'll work on that document, they can work on that document, and it's just it's impossible for a
Yeah.
translator just to throw in, you know, a name like that. They translate what they see on the page,
And
right?
you've got the checker that's
You got the
checking
checker who's the
the
proofreader.
translator, the proofreader,
Right.
to ensure that what the translator is translating is
Right.
literally word for
And the
word on the paper. So you've got,
right.
let's say, that second line of defense to ensure that the translator is translating things correctly.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
how many times on average does that happen where the checker checks the translator? Let's say you've got the manuscript of Endgame, right? On
Mhm.
average, how many times would you think the checker would check the translator on a manuscript that large?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I can't make a guess on that. It really depends on, a lot of it depends on the deadline too, right? If they have time, if it's a really tight deadline. And I mean, we've been hearing about this book for a long time. So I think it wasn't rushed. Do you know what I mean? So if it's not rushed, then it's better, right? So they'll probably have it depends. I mean, I can't answer for the translator and what her process is, but I know it's a very thorough one. And I can promise you that if she's doing a job like this, she has been thoroughly vetted and she is, top of the line.
Well,
Okay.
like you said earlier
100%.
on in the video, Ailey, it's a case of, publishers go to their tried and true. They go to the
Yes,
translators that they've used before that they
absolutely.
know do a really, really good job. So in this
Hmm.
case, it would be reasonable to think that that's what's
Hmm.
happened with the Endgame publishers and Saskia Peeters. Now, we're at the end of the process, let's say, right? Saskia Peeters has finished her translation. It is complete, okay? The checker has checked it, signs it all off, right? Apart from the checker that checks the translator's translation of, let's say, Endgame in this case, generally speaking, who else would sign off on it before it's published? Who else would have sight of it before it goes?
The agent, okay, so the author, agent, and a team of lawyers, okay? So these things, like these mistakes just don't happen like this, okay? You've got a bunch, yeah, you've got lawyers and you've got, I don't, the agent and the author. In my experience, the agent and the author are involved in the entire process and everything is checked by that lawyer. Not a word, not an accent gets missed.
So, generally speaking, in terms of this process, when a manuscript is finished, then you've got, lawyers, you've got the publisher, you've got the author, you've got the agent that reads through it to ensure
Mhm.
that they're happy with it before then that translation goes public.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I have spent literally going word for word, accent by accent before that thing is finalized. This is the most harrowing part of a translator's job, is getting that thing done, to meet the deadline and that every single word has been translated properly, has been proofed, and has been checked. Okay. So that's a process. Okay. There's also guaranteed a chain of emails. Translators, obviously, they put everything in writing. So I guarantee you this translator has protected herself and she'll have the chain of emails. As far as who, um, you know, for this translator to have translated, you know, something, these names. So what am I trying to say? So this translator, she would not have just made up these names. Okay, she has to have seen them to have translated them. And another thing about translation is names. Whenever you get a translation, the first thing you ask your client, in this case would be the publisher, would be provide the correct spelling of all English names. Okay, that's it, because you don't translate names unless it's not a Latin based alphabet, right? So, like Chinese or Cyrillic, Greek or something like that. Do you know what I mean? You'd ask, it's a standard question that all translators ask, right? So, that in itself, right there, it's they're looking for names. Names are a big deal in translation. So it's not something that would just get missed. The only scenario that this would happen is if the translator went rogue, and she had some sort of weird ulterior motive, and she doesn't. Okay, translators are freelance and independent. She's not going to risk her entire reputation on this. I can guarantee you.
Okay. So, guys, there you go. A little bit of an insider look into the translator world. Hearing it from someone who has 3 decades in that world themselves. I mean, to think that, when you look at the general process of how a text is translated, that at the end, there's a possibility that, based on general process, before the book was released, it could have been that the publisher, the agent, and potentially even Omid Scobie himself saw the Dutch transcript before it was even released. Not saying that actually happened, but, that was a possibility based on general practice. Whew, that just blows my mind in of itself, guys. With that being said, if you appreciated Ailey and her insight, then do go support her over on Tiggy Associates. Go to tiggyassociates.com. The website will be in the description bar below. I do want to thank you again, Ailey, for taking the time out for this interview and shedding some light a little bit more on the whole translator process and the industry. I've hated it the last couple of days that he's essentially gaslighted you lot. So I thought it was about time we actually spoke to someone from the industry so we can set some things straight. And this whole BS of translation error, yeah, I think that's definitely gone out of the window at that point. Guys, if you also appreciated this video and you want more, and of course there's going to be more, then make sure on your way out you subscribe to join our Alternate tribe. I'll be honest with you, help us get to 100k so we can get that silver play button right there and hopefully cause a Christopher Boozy meltdown on Twitter. Like, share, comment down below your opinion, conspiracy theories, whatevers. And if you do have some very strong opinions about what Ailey's just said, and I bet you do, then make sure you send me a super thanks. It's just below this video right here. We can have a conversation about it all because it does guarantee a response from me. And until the next time, you guys, laters.